Hello there, Alaskans, wherever you are. Welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show. Coming to you from somewhere in Alaska. This is the place where we talk about, you guessed it, Alaska. Where we keep the mainstream media on their toes and where we are standing up for what's right in a world run by leftists. You can find out more by heading over to mustreadalaska.com and also checking out the Must Read Alaska YouTube channel for some really great content. But first, let's get this party started.
Well, welcome everybody to the Must Read Alaska show. I'm your host, John Quick, and I'm coming to you live from somewhere in Alaska. I'm very excited today. I want to first thank our folks for that listen, read, and watch Must Read Alaska. Maybe you listen to us here on the show. Maybe you read us on the World Wide Web on our website, or maybe you use our app. Maybe you've gone to the Google Store or the Apple Store and you've downloaded our Must Read Alaska app for free. Thank you so much for doing that, for interacting with us. We do this for folks just like you that will be able to get the news and all the nooks and crannies of Alaska. We also want to thank our show sponsor, Guggenstein for Senate, for sponsoring the Must Read Alaska show. We are very grateful for her sponsorship. Because of her sponsorship, we're able to get conservative news through all the nooks and crannies of Alaska, which we are very excited about. And we have a very awesome guest today. Our guest today is none other than the legend Dorene Lorenz. She has been the news guru of Alaska for a while and is currently kind of doing her own things, which we will get into later. But welcome to the Must Read Alaska show, Dorene.
Oh, thank you so much, Jonathan. You're very gracious.
So I'm very excited that you're on the Must Read Alaska show, because I would guess 9.9 times out of 10, you've been the one doing the interviews. You've probably done hundreds, if not thousands of interviews over your career, and hopefully have hundreds and thousands of more interviews to do. So I'm very stoked that you're on here and letting us ask you the questions. So for our readers maybe that have lived under a rock the last 10 years, tell us a little bit about where you grew up and how you first got involved in politics / the news business. I'd love to hear it.
Sure. So I'm a Seward girl. My great grandparents came up in the 40s, born and raised there. My parents moved to Anchorage, and we moved into Heathered Meadows subdivision back when Tudor was dirt. And I went to Tudor Elementary School. And then I went to Mountain View because we were rich folks. And then we moved out to Eagle River because housing was really cheap. So I went to finished up at Homestead Elementary, got my first job in the news at Greening Junior High, where I was the page editor of the local paper at the junior high school, graduated from Chuyak, and then my parents moved back to Seward.
Nice. So you went from being the junior high newspaper editor or reporter to having, become the news anchor and having your own Good Morning Alaska show. How did that transpire? Did you always know that was something that you wanted to do, was be a news anchor on, one of the biggest channels of news in Alaska?
So I have a quirky job trajectory. I never wanted to be in news. I went to CBS back in the day because I worked for Kivkik Group and Frostbite Productions, and everyone on our crew had worked in news except for me. And so they would say things like, well, make that a double Vosot. And I would have no idea what they were talking about. So I thought, well, I should probably intern in news for a week or two so that I could, understand what these terminologies are, because back in the day, you didn't have the internet. And so I went over and I was rejected. Lauren Maxwell told me that I couldn't work there. She was probably smart. And then one of the folks who worked on the evening news said, can you write to time? And I'm like, yes, absolutely. I was on the debate team and I can write within a second or two of the time that's allotted. And so she had me rewrite the 6 o'clock news to the 10 o'clock news. And at about that time, Gottstein purchased the station, and then he brought in the folks from CNN Headline News, and they trained everybody. So that's really where I got my training, was the folks from CNN Headline News. And then I worked for CBS for a short period of time, and then went back into the world of public relations, and then came back because Lori Tipton had taken over at ABC Fox, and I came in to visit with her, and I was just laughing because her office was such a disaster. I think her desk actually was propped up on phone books on one corner, and there was a big blood stain in the ceiling and another one on the carpet. And I was like, what are you doing here? Why do you go from channel 2 to here? And she's like, because I can do whatever I want. Nobody tells me who to interview. No one tells me what stories to run. I have a lot of ability here to tell news the way I feel it needs to be told. And she's like, and you should jump on board. So I did. And I started there with co-hosting with Mark Colavecchio. I think it was Alaska Political Insider.
Nice. So I'm sure that you've probably interviewed lots of folks. Some have probably been interesting. Some have probably been not interesting. What are a couple of your favorite interviews that you've done over the years, and why?
I think one of my favorites would have to be Vladimir Putin. I interviewed him about the time that Russia was going into Crimea. I got one question and one question only, and it was a fluke, one of those total fluke things. I asked if he was interested in getting Alaska back. And his response was basically, we have Siberia, we're kind of busy with that. And Alaska is like not anything compared to Siberia, so it wouldn't be worth our time. Another one that I thought was really interesting was David Kaczynski. He is the Unabomber's brother. He came on board and talked about the difficulties he was having turning his brother in, knowing that the death penalty was on the table. And it was a really compelling, heartfelt interview. And that really meant a lot to me. I would say the funnest one I had was with the Finnish foreign minister. He was getting a lot of grief. We were at the Hotel Captain Cook, and there was foreign ministers from several Arctic countries there, and they were giving him a real hard time because it was like his second day in the job, and they sent him to this big conference, the Glacier Conference, and they were talking about which Arctic country had the most power, which foreign minister was really the guy to go. And I just happened to have Santa Claus, the guy was running for Congress.
Oh, yeah.
Santa Claus and me go back. He is the best interview ever for Christmas Day because there is no news on Christmas Day. It's a dead news day. So I would ring up Santa Claus live, and he would come up with these fantastic stories about delivering presents and all the shenanigans that happened. So I had him on my cell phone, and I'm like, hey, Santa Claus. And he goes, hey, Dorene, how's it going? And everyone was floored because they were like, that is seriously real power that you have Santa Claus.
you got Santa Claus just on speed dial.
I'm like, absolutely. He actually lives in Alaska. He's not some, idea. He's a real person. And yeah, we claim Santa. We've got this power here.
So you've also kind of traveled the world. Do you have a favorite country you've been to and a story behind that?
Pakistan. Absolutely Pakistan. I was a fellow with the International Center for Journalists, and they sent us 2 journalists from Pakistan to embed in our newsroom. Fantastic young women, absolutely fantastic young women, completely blown away by their talent. Sherbano at the time was producing the #1 morning show in Pakistan, in Karachi, and her makeup and hair department is bigger than my news group. I mean,
that's crazy.
You walk in there and she must have literally 100 people working for her, folks sleeping on the floor in shifts. I was like, this is fantastic. And then Farhad, she is currently with BBC. When I was in Pakistan visiting with her, she received an award for being the #1 political reporter in Afghanistan or in Pakistan, and she is their Afghanistan reporter. So she goes over the border and reports there. And bless her heart, she came to Juneau to visit me, and it was at the time that the Taliban got Afghanistan back. And I've always had serious concerns because reporters around the world are targets. And in Pakistan, there was over 800 that had been targeted for murder. 3 people were arrested, 2 went to trial, 1 was convicted, and then the sentence was thrown out, a week or 2 later. The guy served no time. And Farhat herself has been, physically attacked. She's had gangs roll over her news van, and set it, saying they're going to set it on fire. I mean, she's a war correspondent with bullets flying next to her. And I wish that we all could be so brave as her. And their commitment to telling fair and balanced stories speaks to the fact that she was the first person as a woman who went to Afghanistan and spoke with the head of the Taliban very early on. And she wore Western clothes and she wore makeup, and she asked those hard-hitting questions like, what are you going to do about, people with a different religion? What are you going to do for women? What are you going to do for education? And when they would divert, she would just go right back at it. I fear for her life quite often, but she is the kind of person that is very resourceful, and she got out of there safely and has continued a very brilliant career. But seeing them in situ and seeing what their life is like and what Pakistan is like really it was life-changing for me. It made me so grateful.
Yeah, we have it pretty good here in America.
They have an overpass, and children gather daily there to go to school. They have a meal. They give them a clean t-shirt so they'll have something to wear. They have armed guards so people don't come and steal the kids for sex trafficking. And those children will walk for miles to go to school under an overpass to learn how to read and write so they can have a better life.
Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal. I went to Honduras with Samaritan's Purse once, and went to the garbage dump cities there, and it's all kids, and there's no adults, and literally hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of kids living in not even what we would consider dumps here in America. They're just places that people have dumped their trash with over the course of decades with no reason to, cover it up or anything like that we do in the US. And it's just kids living there in the garbage, eating the garbage, living in the garbage. And that was a trip for me that put a lot of things in perspective of how good we have it here and how we complain about the stupidest things that other people in other countries don't have to worry about.
I am so grateful for my problems. So grateful for my problems. I am so grateful to be living in a state as magnificent as Alaska and all the opportunities we have afforded here. It was really changed my perspective for the rest of my life.
Well, one of the things that I think is unique about you is I believe you've been a registered Republican for a long time. Mm-hmm. Were you alone in the field there? Did that make it more difficult, more easy to do a news job? Typically, you ask the average person on the street in Alaska, what do you think a news reporter is? They're going to say liberal, Democrat, 9.9 times out of 10. And here you are, a Republican for, doing your job for the last, since you started it. Did that make it easier or harder, or did it not matter either way?
I've always been of the impression that the person you're interviewing should never have the slightest idea what your political thoughts are. And in part of being fair and balanced, which I think is the code I try to go to, I always look for the positive and try to stay away from the negative. I think that bringing other people down doesn't bring the rest of us up. And when someone is saying crazy, I had this experience, Jonathan, when I was on Seward City Council, where this particular individual who was giving testimony is a wackadoo person whose ideas are on the other end of the spectrum of mine. And instead of tuning them out, I actively listened to what they were saying, 99% of which was sewage and wackadoo. But in there was this little kernel of a bright idea. And once they said it, I spoke to Steve Schaefer, who was sitting next to me. And between the two of us, we came up with a springboard from that bright idea that actually came into something that was a workable solution to a problem the community had. So it gave me an appreciation for people who have a completely different point of view than I do. And I think as long as everyone is respectful and we come to the idea that people are doing the best they have with what they've got, and even if their ideas are wackadoo, somewhere in there is something that could be useful for everyone. I think that it makes it a lot easier to set your own feelings aside and listen. And I think listening is the most important thing we can do.
Well, I like that philosophy. I appreciate that. You've done a lot in your career. You've accomplished a lot of things. You've interviewed Vladimir Putin, which is pretty freaking awesome. What are there a couple of things that stick out to you as accomplishments that you're proud of over the years that you've been able to achieve, and why?
Yeah, I have some accomplishments I'm particularly proud of. Back in the day, the Ferrandi used to have an international hybrid wolf show, and I had an Arctic tundra wolf, Aquila, and we took first place. And that was particularly great for me because on his way, Aquila was just a naughty boy. So I don't know anything about showing dogs. And Aquila and I went around the room, and the first thing he did was steal the box of donuts off the judge's table. And I had to get back from him. And then the judges came over to, check his confirmation, and he ended up rolling on his back. And then the guy was tickling his tummy, and he peed in the guy's face a little bit. And then we were walking around, because they show their gate, and there was a little kid there, and Aquila went up and started licking the little kid's face. And he still won grand champion. So for me, considering all those shenanigans, that was a real accomplishment I was amazingly proud of. We were actually walking out the door because I thought, there's just no way. I'm sorry, this is ridiculous, when they announced our name. So that was probably my proudest moment because, it's Ferrandi, and who isn't proud of winning at Ferrandi?
So is the dog still around, or did he pass?
Oh, no, he's passed away. That was several decades ago. He's my favorite pet by far. He was amazing.
So did you get like a plaque or something, or an award?
I got a ribbon, and I still have it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, that's a pretty awesome accomplishment. One of the things that I think is one of my favorite things that you've championed over the years is, when I think of Dorene, I think of that you love all things historical. And one of the things that you've championed was Jesse Lee Home, which is the place where the Alaska flag song was consecrated or invented, or whatever the correct word is there. And you really put in a huge valiant effort, sometimes by yourself, sometimes with other folks on board, to save that home. For folks that don't know anything about, I just said Jesse Lee Home, and they're like, I don't even know what that means. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is and why it was so important for you to try to save that?
Of course. Thank you for asking. The Jesse Lee Home was a building I did not appreciate at all when I first got started. To me, it was just a really pretty but abandoned building that used to have great fields in front that I would graze my horse on. That's how was my understanding of the building. But my grandmother, Millie Sorensen, had a bestie. Her name was Fanny Kearns. And Fanny was an Eskimo lady from Hope who worked at the Jesse Lee Home as a seamstress. And she's our Betsy Ross. She sewed the first Alaska state flag together by hand out of scrap material. Wow. And I did not have at all the appreciation for the building and its historic importance that my grandmother did. But on her deathbed, she made me promise that I would do what I could to save the building. And I've made maybe half a dozen promises in my lifetime. I take them very seriously. So I agreed to do that. And so that's where my passion came from, was the promise I made to my grandmother. The building itself and what happened there was just phenomenal. It was such an important part of the Alaska Native Rights movement. Benny Benson was a young man whose mother had passed away, and his father was unable to care for the children. He started out in Unalaska, and then when they moved to Seward in the 1920s, he was there as well. He designed this, In addition to coming in second place in the mountain marathon race, amongst Benny's accomplishments was designing the Alaska state flag. And as a young man, everyone was pretty sure he didn't understand its importance. So William Paul was the representative in the Alaska Territorial Legislature who wrote him a letter and said, "Hey, kid, so you know, this is an important thing because Alaska Natives were just recognized by the state of Alaska. And I am the first Alaska Native to serve in the legislature. And it is my bill that is making this flag design of yours our state flag. And you being a young Alaska Native lad who competed head on with the preferred race, the white race, and won is amazing." I think what most people don't realize is that the Jesse Lee home really encouraged the Native kids. Well, they weren't just Native, they were all races there, to really move forward in life. Of course, there were always personality differences, but it didn't have the kind of problems that you normally associate with boarding schools for Native children. The kids, it was a home, and the children were treated exactly the same as the people who worked there treated their own children. So the members of the Alaska Native Brotherhood also wrote Benny Benson a letter at the Jesse Lee home that said, "You've given us something that we haven't had until now. You've given us hope." And I think that history of hope with the Jesse Lee home, with the Alaska Native Rights Movement, was extremely important. And it was a beautiful building. It had architectural merits that were amazing. And I could go on in its history for half an hour. Literally, I have been timed. That's just one of the items that happened there. It was also the last wing of the tuberculosis epidemic, where the local doctor did something really crazy. He opened up people's chests with 2 potato mashers and took a look at their lungs and helped figure out a cure for tuberculosis, and was awarded the Lorraine Cross, the Red Cross, for that. And I could go on and on and on, but I won't, because I know your show is not that long. But it was a phenomenal building with a really important space in Alaska history. And I'm grateful that I was able to have an appreciation for it and be able to be its champion for a while.
And for folks that are listening, I believe the building got tore down, right?
Yes, the state of Alaska spent $1 million that they gave to the city of Seward to rip the building down in a time when lumber was skyrocketing. All of this thousands of square feet of first growth lumber that was in prime condition was torn down and taken to the dump. A lot of people said, "Hey, let us go in and take out those amazing floors and those huge 20-foot beams with, not even a nail hole in them." And they just tore it all down. They did it very quickly. They didn't exactly follow protocol. So it's my understanding that the EPA is looking at it because there's asbestos and mercury issues now.
Yeah, if it's such a tragic event, in my opinion. I think that there's, in Alaska, we don't have many buildings like that. You go back on the East Coast and there's, 100-year-old buildings are a dime a dozen. We just don't have that in Alaska. We have a couple of really cool old buildings that, people know about, Kennecott Mines and those kinds of things. But this was one of them. And it was such a missed opportunity, I believe, for the state of Alaska to jump in and save the building. They could have, they should have, they would have, kind of type of deal, and it's too late now. And not only did they not save the building, but they didn't let folks retain any of their lumber. Somebody could have jumped in there. The state of Alaska's got 5 dozen project managers, all paid $120,000 a year, various different projects. They could have lended a project manager to this just to get rid of the lumber alone to folks. I'm sure there's folks willing to even buy it. And it's just a tragedy. This building is gone. It will no longer be here. And it's really just a result of, I think, people not willing to come together and have a conversation. And whoever made the decision to demolish it, that's on you. And I hope you make better choices in the future, because that was one crappy decision. Well, what do you think, about this political crazy world we live in? I think a lot of times people are, including myself, when I point a finger, I'm pointing two right back at myself. It's very daunting sometimes to feel like you can make a difference in this crazy political world. It seems to get more and more polarized as the day goes on. How do you think somebody makes a difference in this world? Does showing up to meetings still help? Does writing letters help? Does running for local offices help? How does somebody make a difference today in Alaska?
I'll give you an example. I had an injury that kept me out of work for some time. And my first day back on the job, I came back in early because I had scheduled Joe Miller. And it was right after Joe had Tony arrested or shackled up for asking the wrong questions at a press conference. So it was a little dicey, let's put it that way. And Joe's known for not being the most gentlemanly when he's referring to whoever he's running against. So I had a head injury, I had TBI, I had a broken back, and I was a little loopy. Let's just throw that in there. And so I said, hey, look, Joe, this is the deal. We're going to be on live television. And if you say one thing that's controversial or say one negative thing about your opponent, I'm going home because I just don't have the energy for it. If you want to sit here and tell me about you and what makes you a great candidate and your outlook and your thoughts on how to move Alaska forward, I will sit here all day for that. And so to Joe's credit, he did. He was forthcoming. He was genuine. He was interesting. He didn't say one negative thing about anything or anyone. And it was a really great interview that I felt really strongly about, that really showed Joe for who he is as a person, as opposed to who he is as a caricature. And I think if everyone showed up at the table like that, it would completely change our political climate. And more quality people would be willing to run for office and hold office because they and their families wouldn't be targets and the conversation wouldn't be so toxic. And instead it would be, we may have different ideas on how to get there, but we both have the same goal in sight. So let's figure out how to move Alaska forward. And I think by taking that outlook, I'm not even going to talk about my opponent. I'm just going to talk about my ideas and my thoughts and who I am and what I bring to the table. I think we completely could change the political climate to one that actually serves us instead of entertains us.
That was a great thought. I think oftentimes I don't have TV, but I watch some fun YouTube channels with my kids. And I see some of these political ads and I just think to myself, boy, that was kind of entertaining, but it didn't really inspire me to do anything about voting for that person. And I think sometimes we've lost sight of politicians. My hope would be they get more in the game of inspiring and then doing what you're going to say as opposed to cutting down the opponent and being negative. I just think that people are done with negative. I even get comments on our, it's funny, I'll get comments on our, pretty much every time I'll do a show, and there'll always be a couple folks on there. Why didn't you yell at the person? Why didn't you call them on their stuff? And that's just not my style. My style is to get to know somebody and hear what they have to say, and then let the folks decide for themselves if they like it or not. My platform is not to beat down on somebody. If that's what the person wants to do that's commenting, go start your own podcast and beat down on whoever you want. You won't have many guests that will want to be on it.
It's tough, and people forget that they're people. It's a human being that you're interviewing that has actual feelings. And when you make really negative accusations or you go after somebody, those scars stick around, and they definitely flavor the person's point of view for the next person that's interviewing them. I've had that where I've interviewed folks who have been beaten up by the person who interviewed them before I did. And it shows, and it's not a kind thing to do to people.
So you probably had some folks that you've looked up to over the years. Who's been a hero to you, and why has that person kind of played that role in your life?
I would say my first hero would be Penny Hardy when I was growing up. She's someone that is not well known outside of Lowell Point, but she was one of my grandmother's friends. And so she'd always be at the kitchen table. She was just an honest, hardworking person who did what she could to help her community, was always kind, always considerate, always willing to lend a helping hand. And she was the kind of person that I wanted to be when I grew up.
That's awesome. So right now you have a online swag store that is very art centric. Tell folks about how they can check out what you're currently doing, and what's, give us a little peek behind the curtains on what's next for you.
Sure. So that my little project for COVID was I started a travel related store. I got some goodies to show.
Nice.
So this is a little sample pillow. I took old postcards and I turned them, of Alaska mostly, and I turned them into fun things that you could have at your house. And then like you could see my lampshade in the back. So it's DoreneLorenz.com, and I'm not doing a lot to promote it or sell. I just have fun creating things. I'm like the world's worst salesperson. I think I sold something to my mom and that was about it. But I have a lot of fun making things. They're all made. It took me a long time to find the right manufacturer. There's a place in London that pays their people a living wage, and everything's made there. Everything's sustainably sourced, and there's no third world shenanigans going on, or low end. Everything's high end, nicely done. And so I've just been having a lot of fun with it. Mostly I've been making things for my home, and then people come over, they're like, I want one of these. And so I stuck them on the website. Years ago, I did the Diamond Center Hotel, and it was the same sort of thing. Everyone's like, hey, that's cool, I want one. And then I didn't have any place to send them to. And now I do. DoreneLorenz.com. You can make your house look like my house.
That could be the slogan.
There you go. I've been working a lot, though, in film projects and television projects. Recently, I was on Nat Geo's Something Bit Me, which was a lot of fun. It was my first foray into reality television. I did a film a few years ago called Vampire Foxes from Space, where I play a queen vampire fox that made the film circuit last year, and that was an amazing amount of fun, and it won a ridiculous amount of awards.
Nice. Did you get to go to any of the award shows?
I did. I went to some of the film festivals, and some of the film cons. You dress up in your costume and go. It was ridiculous.
Comic-Con or whatever it's
called.
Yeah,
something like that. It was just hysterical. And they're working on expanding that project into a graphic novel and then another film. And I've been lucky to be involved in that as well. So that's a lot of fun. I also was in a minor role in a 3-part series, What If I Defect? And they just got through shooting the second part of that with Dean Cain. So At some point, I get to be the Lois Lane to Superman in the third act. I'm really excited about that.
Is that like a movie or like a TV show?
Yeah, they're films. They're full-length feature films. And I play the mom of the female love interest. Dean plays the dad of the male love interest. So I'm hoping at some point we get in the third film, meet each other, I think at the wedding. It'll be pretty exciting. And then I just recently, earlier this week, finished a television pilot that I've been working on for quite some time and submitted it to a bunch of film festivals. So hopefully that's going to go somewhere. I had a lot of fun writing it.
Can you say anything about what the film or the TV show is, or is it kind of top secret?
Yeah. No, it's not top secret at all. It's a script. It hasn't been shot yet, but I made it specifically so it could be mostly shot, if not all shot, in Alaska. I think the film industry here brings in great jobs where they spend an incredible amount of money. Sugar Mountain dumped $1 million in Seward one year on the off season, which was fabulous for the community. It's about my experiences at the television station. So I took some of the more interesting things that happened in my TV life and made it into a made up television station where a lot of the stories that run are based off of stories that we ran at the station, and then the shenanigans that go on behind the scenes.
That's awesome. My favorite TV show ever is The Office, which is lots of shenanigans in that show.
Yeah, I love The Office. It's really well written. That's a great show.
So any last thoughts or words that you wanted to chat about before we sign off here? The floor is yours.
Oh, mercy. This political season, we're doing ranked choice voting, and it's been kind of an experiment. And I think that it's really fun that the first ranked choice event we ended up with 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats as the final 4. I mean, how fabulous is that? I love the idea that we're missing the primaries for the Republican Party. I know a lot of people don't like that. I love that. And I really am sad that I'm not on Political Insider or Alaska Daily right now, because one of the things I did was try to interview everyone who was running, not just the front runners. And I miss that, because you pick up some really interesting people who are just starting their political career that, you know, you would normally miss and not give credit to because they're not a name that you know. And then the people who you are well known, you're missing the backstory of why they're doing what they're doing and what's important to them and their point of view and their lessons learned. So that I am missing. And I wish that we had a bigger forum for television in Alaska. News in Alaska has really. So our communities are not well being served. So I'm really grateful for you folks at Must Read Alaska, because you're doing a phenomenal job of bringing forward stories that matter. And I appreciate that. So credit to you, because it's not an easy thing to do. News is a tough job.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. For those of you that are just tuning in, I want to encourage you to go back 30 minutes and listen to the whole thing. We have Dorene Lorenz here on the Must Read Alaska show. Thank you so much for joining us today. You are welcome back anytime you'd like. You've been a fabulous guest. And we want to thank our show sponsor, Gungerstein for Senate, for sponsoring the Must Read Alaska show. It's because of her sponsorship that we're able to get conservative news through all the nooks and crannies of Alaska. Go check her out. She's a nonpartisan candidate running for U.S. Senate and is pro-energy and has got a couple things to say about Joe Biden's job as being president. And so until next time, I'm John Quick from somewhere in Alaska. And I think, what time is it, 9:30? I think we have a double header today. So tune in today. Bear with me here. I'm just going to check my text message to see if we actually do have a double header. And I think we're going to be on today at 11, talking about ranked choice voting. So you're not going to want to miss out on that. Suzanne and I have a special guest today at 11 to talk ranked choice voting. So if you are interested in hearing everything there is to know, probably not everything, because we only have about 45 minutes to hear about ranked choice voting, you're going to want to tune into that. Thanks again, Dorene. It's been a blast. And until next time, from somewhere in Alaska, I'm John Quick signing off. Hope everybody has a fabulous day.